Hamidakyapi, Chantewashte, Nape Chuzapi, Miracle Spotted Berry Machapi, Na Ogala Lakota Hemacha. Hi everyone, my name is Miracle Spotted Bear. I'm a traditional singing artist from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, and I'm Oglala Lakota. Away, away, yahoo, hey, hey, way, ha, hey, way, ha, hey, hey, way, hey, away, ahoo, hey, way, ha, hey, Chakuluta te wahilapo mita kuyeyo wani wachielo tonka shila o makiyayo tonka shila pila maya yelo hai away aho hai hey way ha hey way ha hey hey way away aho hey way ha hey yo Chakuluta te wahilapo mita kuyeyo wani wachielo tonka shila makiyayo tonka shila pila maya yelo hai Advocacy.
Lean Lynch and Jasper Oos, a very special thank you to Miracle for getting us started in a good way. As to Melguinis, hello, my relatives. Welcome to the Remembering Our Sisters Forum. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're joining us because, like us, you believe that Indigenous women are sacred, and a threat to Indigenous women, girls, trans, and two-spirit relatives is a threat to us all. As you know, May 5th is a national day for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And we're privileged to partner with our relatives at Native Americans in Philanthropy and my former colleague, Eric Stegman. My name is Meadowlark, which is Huele in my traditional language. I am a member of the Coeur d'Alene tribe. My English name is Nikki Petrie, and I serve as the executive director for the Center for Native American Youth at the Aspen Institute. Our women, girls, trans, and two-spirit relatives experience violence, sexual assault, and go missing or are murdered at the highest rate of any other ethnic group. Half experience violence in their lifetime, and 96% experience violence from non-Native perpetrators. Like so many, we come together to honor, remember, and commit to creating spaces that lead with love and culture and Indigenous values to ensure that we are addressing this epidemic head on. The Center for Native American Youth is a Native youth-led and Native youth-serving organization that is housed at the Aspen Institute. And our youth know that the current reality of this epidemic does not need to be our future. Young people are leading and very much at the front lines of dismantling systems, raising awareness and advocating for policies, organizing in movements and coalitions in every part of Indian country. Native youth are leading their communities in setting a new vision for our people, one that restores balance and sacredness for women, girls, trans, and our two-spirit relatives. In 2021, the Center for Native American Youth launched Remembering Our Sisters, a digital arts and storytelling fellowship that centers youth voices and supports young leaders in the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, trans, and Two-Spirit Plus epidemic. Remembering Our Sisters builds upon the successful work of the Center for Native American Youth's leadership portfolio through unique visual arts and storytelling lenses. These fellows joining us shortly have participated in interventions such as a comprehensive understanding of the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, trans, and Two-Spirit Plus movement, cultural teachings, intergenerational learning spaces, and more. These 6 Remembering Our Sisters fellows were awarded financial supports to create a digital arts and storytelling project. And I invite you to visit our website, www.cnay.org, to learn more about Remembering Our Sisters, the fellows, and of their projects. I look forward to a day when we do not need a national day of remembrance for Indigenous people who have been subjected to violence and murder. And I invite you to reflect on ways that you can contribute in addressing this epidemic with all of us that centers youth voices in design. As this epidemic impacts all of us, and it will take all of us to address it. And as our anti-Deb, Secretary Holland, has said, we still have a long road ahead of us. We still have a long road ahead of us, but it takes time to address the root causes of violence against Indigenous people, which are centuries of the making. And I know that with everyone working together, we can do this. It is now my pleasure to introduce Mary Catherine Nagle to the screen. She's an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation, is an attorney who focuses on protection of tribal sovereignty and an inherent right of Indian nations to protect their women and children from domestic violence and sexual assault. Her play Sliver of a Full Moon has been performed at law schools from Stanford to Harvard, NYU, and Yale. She has worked extensively on violence against women reauthorization, and she has filed numerous briefs in the United States Supreme Court as part of the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center's Iowa Sovereignty Initiative. She represents numerous families of murdered and missing Indigenous women, including Sarah Stops Pretty Places and other Indigenous families. Thank you so much, Mary Catherine Nagle, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's just an honor to be here and to see all of these amazing young women doing this incredible work. You know, when we think about this day of awareness, I'm actually here in Montana today, and actually just listened to Melinda Harris speak. Melinda Harris is Hannah Harris's mother. We have this National Day of Awareness because Hannah Harris was murdered, as so many of our Indigenous relatives have been, and her mother Melinda used her voice and advocated and is still advocating for change. And I think all of our victims' families have worked tirelessly, have sacrificed many hours of their lives to fight to bring awareness, to create federal legislation, national awareness days, and we know it's still not enough. We know that our relatives are still going missing, still being murdered. There's still so much more work to do, but it's important to understand that in the context of the crisis, we have a cultural crisis and we have a legal crisis. We have a cultural crisis because we have a culture in the United States that celebrates violence against Native women, quite frankly. And we have a legal crisis because not only do we have an American culture that thinks it's completely okay to wear Native women as Halloween costumes, but we also have a legal structure that prohibits tribal nations from exercising full jurisdiction and full sovereignty on their lands to protect their women and children and citizens on their lands. And we also have a system in place where in our border towns, just off the border of a reservation, we have this sort of mythology that the federal government doesn't have any responsibility in border towns, when we know, because of the hundreds of treaties that the United States signed with tribal nations, the federal government has a treaty trust, duty, and responsibility to protect all of our tribal citizens, even when we step off the reservation border. And so when our citizens are being murdered at incredibly high rates in places like Bighorn County or other border town communities, and the local sheriff and county officials don't want to bring justice to the situation because it's simply not a priority for them, or their corruption or whatever might be going on in that local community, the federal government has a trust, duty, and responsibility to step in. And so today is a day of awareness. It's a day of standing in solidarity with our victims' families and demanding the change that we need to see, both, within our own tribal governments. We have some, tribal leaders who are not taking this issue seriously. We have some that do, but also within our state governments and within our federal governments. And as we all know, if we're going to solve this crisis, it'll be the next generation. Our generation has started to take a step, but it's going to be that next generation that's going to come up and really effectuate some powerful change. And we're just really looking to all of these amazing women who are about to present on their hard work, and just really thankful for everything they've been able to do so far. And I'm going to jump right into it because I don't want to run out of time before the end of the hour to have them be able to present. And so at the very top of our time together, I want to welcome Maya Sanchez and Lauren Porek to join. If you can please go ahead and turn on your cameras. Maya is a Dene and Mexica woman. She is the second oldest of 4 and was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. Maya is currently employed at the California Native Vote Project as a youth organizer. She loves animals, nature, and coffee. Her work within the MMIWG2S+ movement has centered knowledge sharing. For her awareness project, she interviewed various leaders in the movement to educate and broaden the perspectives of others wishing to aid in the protection of our women and girls. So we want to welcome Maya. And Lauren, also known as Sunset Woman, is an Ojibwe 2SLGBQ+ youth working to improve their communities and assist in helping other Native youth like her. This interest was sparked from their own life experiences and personal hopes for a future in which Native youth are thriving and believed in. She's worked for CNAY on their Democracy is Indigenous project, and also is a youth food representative with Detroit's American Indian Health and Family Services. In her spare time, she loves to hang out with families and her friends and her friends and family make art and play video games. Through her project, Lauren hopes to highlight the identities of our Indigenous women and girls. So thank you both so much for being here with us today. My first question will be for Lauren. And Lauren, we have seen young people lead in movements that disrupt systems and institutions and create strong futures for us all. I'm thinking of the Standing Rock movement, which began and led by youth. Can you share how the Native youth voice contributes to raising the profile of MMIWG2S+, of the MMIWG2S+ epidemic?
Yeah, so bonjour everybody. I believe that personally, as youth nowadays, one thing that we have that I'd say is so much better in a way than other generations probably have had before us, is that we have this ability to we have the ability, fortunately nowadays, all of us do technically, to put our opinions out there where everybody can see them and interact with them. The internet has been such a great place for that. It's been a great place to also kickstart these movements and to just find like-minded youth and network with them in ways that we probably couldn't have done so before, or would have been very much hard to do before. That being said, Native youth voices contributing to raising the profile in the MMIWG Two-Spirit epidemic. It's really helped because it's normalized, or not normalized, but it's really made this talk a very public and open, let's talk about it. They've covered, I've seen so many youth or whatever, for example, on TikTok, and they'll do whole profiles sort of on these people, help raise awareness, or even blast other people's projects too, and put them out there, which have been really, really amazing to see, as well as being able to make nowadays infographics and whatnot on the movement that maybe, I don't want to say easily digestible, but easily digestible for other people to read. It makes it more accessible. It makes it just something that people are able to just easily get their hands on and read about this and then share that information and so on and so forth. Therefore, getting people to hopefully probe further and look more into this, read more about the statistics, and then in their way, raise awareness as well. So I'd say that's where I think youth have been such a very crucial part in this.
Well, I appreciate that answer and I agree completely. I think sometimes if it's hard to see immediately the results of the youth advocacy, I can just tell you as someone who is, I guess, now getting to be a middle-aged adult, you all are inspiring. And I think that you don't even understand sometimes how you inspire the adults to keep going, because adults can get really negative and downtrodden about things. And the fact that you all are working so hard is just so inspirational. And you bring new ideas, new creativity, new wisdom that really that is so critical for the work. So I just want to amplify everything you're saying. And I want to bring Maya into the conversation. Maya, this fellowship was unique in that it was a hybrid design and focused on using art as activism. You had opportunities to gather virtually and in person while building artistic skill. What was it like for you to participate in a program with a hybrid model that centered digital arts and storytelling?
Hello. So I'd like to start with thank you for having us here. Hello, everyone. So from my experience, this was my first time ever applying for a fellowship that specifically centered on digital arts and storytelling. So everything was very new to me. I think I'm like reflecting now on this past year, because a year ago today, we were having like our MMIW week, you know, together for the first time, the 6 of us. And it's just been a beautiful experience this whole past year. Like I've made 5 other friends, including staff from CNAY, and these relationships will last forever, I know it. So my experience with the project itself, I think is very important to have fellowships that have, I'm getting a little nervous, sorry. That teach, or that are continuing to teach like Native youth how to like capacity build and learn how to use like digital arts and storytelling to advocate for things, for movements like the MMIW G2S+. I know that especially in this past 2 years with the pandemic and everything turned virtual, I was kind of like, I had to like transition from being everything in person to being online. And I learned a lot of new skills like that. And I continue to learn new skills virtually that I didn't have before. So it's kind of like a blessing and a curse. And I think it's important for all Indigenous youth to know all these new skills, because they're the future, and it doesn't seem like technology is not slowing down anytime soon. So I believe that it's an advantage for Native youth to grow with the times. And I think storytelling is definitely very important as well. As Indigenous people, storytelling is one of like our most treasured things in life. You know, that's how our traditions are passed down, our songs, our medicine, our songs. Did I say songs already? I'm not sure. Everything is passed down through storytelling, you know, and it's usually orally. You know, we lost a lot of, I would say like knowledge this past 2 years, especially with like our elders, our culture bearers. You know, a lot of our elders are women too. They're the traditional culture bearers, and I think it's very important to continue to tell those stories and even document them in more modern ways, so that way we don't lose them and that those are there like forever. And then as far as like gathering virtually and in person, I think it came at the right time. You know, like I really needed these relationships with these girls at that time in my life. And I'm so thankful for it. And to all like commence it, like almost the whole year of being virtually, to like like kind of like tie it all together with an in-person trip where we got to meet each other for the first time in person. I think that was like the most bittersweet way to bring it all together.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And we have just a couple more minutes before we need to move on to our next pair. But Lauren, what is a teaching or lesson from remembering our sisters that you carry with you in your advocacy work for MMIW G2S+?
One thing that I've honestly carried throughout this whole thing is, I'm trying to think of the correct words, but basically like not just seeing everybody, I guess, is multifaceted and beyond just, I'd say, beyond one lens, and but also making sure to hold them with respect. Like one thing that I wanted to center on in my own project is to basically collect the stories, kind of make a profile of these MMIWG Two-Spirit relatives as more than just they were here, they had any sort of negative thing happen, and then they're gone. Like, who were they besides that? I remember one of our lovely guests that we had speak to us, Agnes Woodward, she talked to us and told us about her jingle dress project and about her ribbon skirt like project, how she makes those ribbon skirts in like for families of MMIWG Two-Spirit relatives, and how she does it with such respect and honors their memory in such a beautiful way. I hope to kind of like pull from that and hopefully like learn more about these people beyond just these negative parts, and frame them once again as human. Like that's one big thing, is like we're not always seen as that. Like that's been one big problem. We're not always seen as human. We're just caricatures. That we're not here, XYZ, like that we're not here, which is caricature, over sexualized, etc. So to make sure to recenter that like we are human, like these are humans that we are talking about. These aren't just something that is like, oh well, it's just something easy or whatnot to just look at and see it's just maybe like a celebrity case, or how we just watch like the news or whatever. Like these are actual real human lives, and the grief that has been left from all these like people leaving us so soon is it's unsurmountable. There is no true way to like compare it. And I really feel like we like to hone that in all together is like to just remind people like to bring respect and healing to the community too. So much.
Thank you. That's a great answer. And last question for Maya. We know there is power in sisterhood. Can you tell us about how this program has fostered long-lasting relationships between you and the other Remembering Our Other Sisters fellows?
Yes. So on my experience, I know that this time last year, it was the second year, I believe, of the pandemic. I had to become kind of like so like isolated and staying in home and working from home that it was getting real sad. It was getting real lonely. It was getting like I felt like I had no friends anymore. And came along this opportunity that was a really quick turnaround for myself, because I believe my coworker Cheyenne Phoenix, who's here today somewhere in the participants, she had sent me the application email for the fellowship, and she's like, you have 2 days to apply if you're interested. And MMIWG2S has been, although at that point I had not been like involved, I had just known about it and was like somewhat educated on the movement. I was always passionate about my fellow sisters who are out there. Me being an Indigenous woman, I have a lot of like empathy for all my sisters across the country. So this was something that I felt that I could pour myself into, and I got all my stuff together, I applied, and I and I was accepted. And I think that was like probably one of the biggest moments of last year, because now I have 5 other sisters across the country that I know that I can rely on for hopefully for the rest of my life. Like, I'm hoping to be there to support Lauren, Gracie, Cordelia, Lily, and Evan for like, and for whatever they needed my support in. I'm hoping that I can be there for them in whatever way they need me. I think from being like, we started like a group chat right away, like on Instagram, to stay connected for like the inside jokes or for just extra stuff. Like we would video call each other like on the side when there wasn't like meetings. We tried to plan movie nights so many times and it was unsuccessful because we're also busy. There's some college students on the fellowship. I was always busy with work. Not only that, but the time differences across the country was always so tricky. But we made it work. And I'm so thankful for that. And I think I just, in my experience, I know that I treasure these relationships that I made with these girls for the rest of my life. And I'm hoping that programs like this can continue to get funded, so that way other Indigenous youth can have opportunities like this to increase the capacity and build relationships like this, because it is truly one of like the best of my life.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that. And I think you all will be an amazing force moving forward as you continue to work together throughout your lives. It will be absolutely amazing. Indian country will benefit. I want to now bring into the conversation Cordelia Falls Down and Gracie Aragon. Cordelia is a member of Crow Nation and United Katua Band. Her Crow name translates to Sacred Dream Woman, given to her by her grandfather, Art Alden, a Vietnam veteran. Her clan is, and I might pronounce this wrong, Piegan, and she's a child of Piegan. Cordelia is from the Crow Reservation of Montana, but currently resides in Norman, Oklahoma, where she completed a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and a minor in Native American Studies at the University of Oklahoma. She is currently in graduate school to pursue a master's in Native American Studies, Tribal Governance and Policy. Cordelia's awareness project centers conversation and healing within the MMIWG Two-Spirit Plus movement. Gracie is from the Pueblo of Acoma, New Mexico. She graduated from Whittier College with a bachelor's degree in political science. Gracie is passionate about helping tribal communities in New Mexico advocate for inclusion, plus accurate representation and the development of policies that directly impact them. In obtaining her degree, she pulled much of her lived experience of working with Indigenous youth and as a United States congressional intern to advocate for Indigenous ways of knowing in a society that perpetuates colonial systems of oppression. During undergrad, she based her work on Indigenous mobilization through cultural sustainability and community building practices. Gracie is an advocate for returning to traditional lifeways, which she feels requires the deconstruction of tools of settler privileges, colonial ideologies, and approaches. For her awareness project, Gracie created the Remembering Our Sisters website. Cordelia, my first question is for you. You have worked to address human trafficking and create safe spaces for women and girls in your community. How has the Remembering Our Sisters Fellowship strengthened your advocacy work?
Hi, first of all, I want to thank everyone for being here. It's an important day and I know it's not an easy day, so thank you for sharing this space with us. So the first project I ever did that she said was the Human Trafficking Project, and that was the very first project I ever did for CNAY. And I was so excited and happy to be a part of this organization and start my first project. I got my bachelor's at OU, and being a Native political science student at a predominantly white institution was not easy, and it had me questioning my place all the time. And I carried that with me. So when I went to CNAY and they gave me this platform, it was just kind of a shock. I got to be a leader, and what I was doing wasn't necessarily questioned, it was encouraged. And I did my project and it was a great turnout, but I still questioned my place. It was like, someone else could have done this better. And when they had more opportunities at CNAY, I applied, and I still was in these spaces, and I still thought to myself, someone else could be doing a lot better job. And it wasn't until the Remembering Our Sisters Fellowship where we had to share our space with 5 other people for 6 months. We got to meet these girls, and it was a lot more as a team rather than individualistic. And when I met them, I remember when we first got our welcome packets, and I was reading the list of advocates and leaders for this movement. And they had all these organizations, and the last one they said was you. And I never forgot that. I thought that was so special. I'm like, wow, I'm a part of this list. And it changed my perspective. And being a part of a fellowship and space where every day I was encouraged by who I call my sisters now, that I was doing good and that it was okay to not be okay some days. And we were all figuring it out together. And there were moments where we were saying, let's just do this tomorrow because it's a lot of work. And I was able to learn a lot about myself, and that I had a right to be there. I still have a right to be here in this space and be a part of this forum and part of this fellowship. And it really taught me that you're never too old, it's never too late to make a difference in someone's life. And especially you're never too young. And so I really want to thank CNAY and my sisters for teaching me that. And that's what I was taught being a part of this fellowship.
Thank you so much, Cordelia. And Gracie, can you share about the awareness and community action projects each fellow created and elaborate on what yours was on?
Sure, thank you, Mary.
So overall, as we've mentioned, the purpose of the ROS Fellowship was to really create awareness through a multimedia platform of our choosing, with the objective being to really equip ROS fellows with the tools and the resources needed to be able to advocate for increased, visibility and also action to end the MMIW GT2S+ epidemic, including, us being able to advocate for policy to end violence against our Indigenous relatives. But more importantly, all of our projects served as a way of honoring the families that have been impacted and affected by the MMIR crisis. All of our projects take different avenues in working to help educate others learn, as well as the, digital format that we had chosen to use. Some of them being a website. I know others did, a zine, a short video, podcasts, artwork, or, even an advocacy toolkit. But before we took on our projects, we actually participated in multiple workshops and trainings for advocacy and historical trauma, which were given by Dr. Billy Jo Kipp, CNAY's Associate Director of Research and Evaluation. But these trainings really stuck with me and actually influenced me to be able to include the historical context of MMIR, which comes from, land and body violence since the onset of colonization. But, alongside these trainings, we also had the opportunity to learn different methods of advocacy by other folks throughout Indian country that are also shedding light on these issues and this crisis throughout, through various mediums of their choosing. But for my project, I chose to create a website because I wanted to have one space where folks can go to, one for education, as well as for kind of a space where people can find state-by-state resources. Sometimes, searching for resources or even ways to get involved can be overwhelming when there are so many avenues to take, so I wanted to take that one, I wanted to create that one space where folks can be able to access a space that has, an educational component on my website. I created a website, but in that space, I wanted to create, or I wanted to include an educational component, the historical trauma and a historical context through the form of a timeline, which is also included on my website. And then it's easier to explain when you're like navigating the website and showing everyone, but I also included, there's a tab for guidance, which includes input from New Mexico's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Task Force members, and also included one of New Mexico state representatives. But another tab, the last tab actually also includes resources and legislation that has either been passed or is pending state by state. So all of these combined on my website, I wanted to, be able to create a space of resources for families throughout the so-called United States, not only specific to New Mexico, but for everyone to kind of be able to navigate the website and find what helps them. I think that my website really helped me take the path of creating awareness through policy advocacy. As I mentioned, I do have a tab that includes the resources and legislation. So I would say policy advocacy as well as resource building, trying to, find these resources, again, not just specific to New Mexico, but state by state, with hopes to, go back and continuously be able to update them, as legislation is passing and pending throughout the so-called United States. But also being able to make an effort to, make that first step to try and manage data state by state. So I really hope that everyone is able to, find
and take away something valuable from my project and all of the other projects by our sisters.
Great. Thank you. Yes, and I see that the link to the projects is here in the chat. Cordelia, you completed your master's thesis, which centers the safety and protection of women and girls. Congratulations, and thank you for your work. Please share with us the importance of tribally led research, data collection, and reporting, especially on the issue of protection for our women and our girls.
Yeah, so my research for my graduate program was utilizing Indigenous community planning and research methodologies to address MMIW in my community. And there's a lot that's written about it, but overall it was I had to address it in my community. So I had to think about how I grew up and what my community taught me and the values I have instilled with me and how to reach my community in a very respectful way. And so I drew back on what was taught to me. And there's a protocol in everything you do. And so throughout my program, when I had to interview people, when you go to someone's house, you bring them a gift. And so what I did was I brought a gift or a monetary gift for their time and thank them for speaking with me. There is a lot in Crow culture where you can't talk to certain people or there's some things you can't talk about. And so what I did was being transparent. And that went back to another Crow value that I heard from my dad was, there are no lies between us. That's a saying for Crow people. And so being completely transparent with the people I was interviewing in my community. So letting them know what it was for, how I was going to do it, who would hear it, and getting permission throughout the entire time of the interview. And what I learned was that they're definitely willing to help me, but there are things that have to stay within the community. And that's, really important. And what I also learned is that you have to make those people feel comfortable because they're sharing their time and space with you. And that is important with Indigenous research. And that's why it's important to have Indigenous researchers who know their community. Another non-Native researcher couldn't do what I do because they wouldn't understand that respect or protocol, because that's something that you're taught as an Apsáalooke community member. And so that's why I really advocate for people to not only within research, but being in those spaces that help aid our community members. My first practice with that was doing the census, having people complete the census in my community. And I know that was something that people had a lot of questions about. What is it for? And there's questions about your home and your family and your race. And I told them what it was for. I had an incentive for their time. And overall, I told them how it would really benefit our communities for them to complete it. And it really taught me that it really is important for us as Native people to be those leaders in our community and take a hold of not just our research and what we do, but just speak on behalf of our community in everything we do. And so I'm really glad. I don't know if any of my community members are on here, but I really want to thank my community for teaching me how to do things in a respectful way, in a respectful manner. And if there's any future researchers out there, I encourage you to do the same. But overall, I'm just very thankful for what I was taught, because I really don't think I could have completed my graduate program without the help of my community and those that helped raise me. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you so much. One final question to Gracie before we move on to Lily and Evan. Gracie, you have participated in phenomenal work nationally and in your community. From a young leader perspective, why is it important for philanthropy to invest in Indigenous youth?
Thank you, Mary. So from a young leader perspective, and I think similar to so many other Indigenous young folks who are, also navigating change in each of our respective communities and also the spaces that we work in, we're passionate about that work. And, these are spaces where young voices are really empowered and included and taken into account. And you don't see that in a lot of spaces. with both of my work done with CNAY as well as the work, I'm involved in local to me here in so-called New Mexico, the voices of young folks are highly valued, and you can see that in the efforts, by looking at the work that many young folks have done, and much of the work that they've done who are involved with CNAY's programs on a national level, as well as the young folks who have contributed a lot to the work of Pueblo Action Alliance, where I work here in so-called New Mexico. I think that, it's amazing to see the work that youth have done in terms of having the agency and the ability and the strength to develop those spaces that are youth-led. This fellowship is also an example of that. And with my work with Pueblo Action Alliance, which is a community-driven organization that works to address social and environmental injustices on a local level, our youth organizers with my work have created an internship for other Pueblo youth in our communities that we come from. And soon we'll be launching a Youth to the Front campaign, which will, really work to uplift youth perspectives in addressing the issues that we endure daily as Pueblo people. So, those are a couple examples of how youth are already, creating those spaces and finding the motivation, but also are inspired and really wanting to do this work because it's something that they're passionate about. So to me, I would say it's important for philanthropy to invest in Indigenous youth because, like I said, we create the spaces that we used to not even have access to in order for us to, begin navigating that social change, and as well as, dismantling systems of oppression through sharing our stories. A lot of it is through storytelling. We're storytelling people. And I think that that's a powerful way of the change that we make, as well as, organizing together for the betterment of our communities. But I think those are all, important things to reflect on for investing in Indigenous youth.
Absolutely. Thank you. Such great message and really important. And I could not agree more about, investing in our youth. And so thank you so much, both to Gracie and Cordelia, for everything you had to share and for all of your incredible work. We're our final pair that we're going to bring in here. We've got just about 11 minutes before the hour. So I want to make sure we get them in here. Lily Painter and Evan Richardson. Lily, and I'm really sorry that I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing your name. Pagayatone brings water from the creek, is an actress, writer, activist, video filmmaker, and current freshman at the University of Oklahoma, pursuing a degree in Native American Studies and Anthropology. She is a member of the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma, as well as the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. Last summer, she was selected to participate in Columbia University's prestigious creative writing course program in partnership with CNAY. Lily believes that her heritage and the roots of her foundation as a young Indigenous woman are powerful and will strengthen her voice to allow her to speak on the challenges that impact her community and bring awareness and education about Indigenous culture as well as mainstream issues. For her project, Lily created a digital collective dedicated to healing and paying homage to our missing and murdered Indigenous relatives while highlighting photography and videography. Evan, sorry that I can't say that great, makes laughter. Richardson is a freshman at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Being a proud member of the Haliwa-Saponi tribe, she plays an active role in her community by participating in culture showcases, traditional arts programs, and the local Indian education program. She has had the opportunity to work on design projects for the United National Indian Tribal Youth Incorporated, the North Carolina Native American Youth Organization, and is a proud illustrator of the children's book titled It's Homecoming, Y'all, Nakoma's Greatest Adventure. Evan hopes that by pursuing her artistic endeavors, she can continue to lift up other Indigenous people just like her mentors have done for her. By continuing to build her artistic skills, she believes that she's fulfilling her purpose. From her project, Evan created the Using Art as Activism Toolkit. Lily, my first question is for you. You are a young creative, from writing to photography. Can you share with us why the arts are a powerful mechanism for change?
Yeah, Kira Taga, everyone. My name is Pagayatone. So for me personally, art has always been a means to digest and process things that otherwise seem really impossible almost. I mean, if we take a step back and really look at, the horror of what the movement itself is about, it's not something that we should ever have to be, it's not something that should ever be in the scope of the world, right? Like Native people shouldn't be having to make entire movements to protect our women. We shouldn't be losing sisters, aunties, mothers, cousins. And for someone who has a really hard time processing the reality of our people sometimes, art has really become a vessel for me to use my own voice for change, but also to channel my inner feelings. And so I think that all significant movements for positive change are accompanied by outpourings of art in some form. And that expression can help open our eyes to injustice and convey really powerful new visions and possibilities. And in making art, we may identify and solve problems we didn't even really set out to solve. So it's like art that comes from such a genuine place like advocacy will cause change because it touches you so deeply as a human.
I agree completely. You are a creative writer. That is such an important art form. All art forms are important, but I've seen firsthand how creative writing, storytelling, which is something our nations have been doing for, since time immemorial, but how it can really change hearts and minds. And so I just so excited to meet you today and to know we have yet another amazing Indigenous writer coming up through the ranks, and can't wait to see all that you do. I want to turn it over to Evan. Your awareness project, the Using Art as Activism Toolkit, has been shared widely. Can you share how this project has built your artistic skills and supported growth for you?
Hey, so I'm glad to be sharing this space with you guys, but I feel like that's such a loaded question because throughout this entire fellowship, like a year ago today, we were sitting on Zoom calls like this and having our welcome week, meeting all these different people in the movement. And that's really what my whole toolkit was rooted in, was seeing how we honor our skills in this movement. And whether you're a cook, you cook and provide those meals for the people searching for our stolen relatives. If you're a drummer, you can sing our sisters home. And if you're an artist, you can use your art in any possible way that you love. And it's just throughout this entire course of this fellowship, meeting all these different people who weren't necessarily artists is what sparked the idea for this toolkit, was making sure that we see our gifts, we thank Creator for those gifts that we get, and we use them accordingly in this movement. And that's what this whole project stemmed from. And I wanted to make sure that there were any other artists out there that we knew how to approach the movement with caution, because we just can't carry these stories without being mindful and practicing mindfulness and making sure that we're being mindful how we use the red handprint and honoring the stories that we're trying to tell, and just keeping that at the focus point of this whole entire being of our art, and making sure we pass that forward to other artists we encounter. But I feel like I've grown a lot just from sitting back and listening to how other people who may not be artists, but work in policy work or do ribbon skirts. I know I can't sew to save my life, but seeing how people honor their own gifts, it's just been so inspiring. And it reminds me that I don't have to run off and try to collect all these different skills and talents and put them under my belt and have my hand in so many pots, but I can honor myself in this movement by recognizing my talent and going forth and spreading awareness in the movement. And I really want to encourage everybody else on this panel and everybody else just watching to do the same.
Absolutely. I just really appreciate your raising those points. That's absolutely important. And we've got time for 2 more questions. And I apologize for everyone who put questions in the Q&A. I could probably spend 5 more hours asking these amazing young women questions, but so we're not going to get to the Q&A, unfortunately. But my final question to Lily is, the Remembering Our Sisters Fellows created recommendations to combat the MMIWG Two-Spirit Plus epidemic. Can you talk about how the recommendations you and the other fellows created are reflective of a holistic approach and why that's important?
Yeah, so when we finally met up to present our projects and flesh out a platform that we as a fellowship would use to address the MMIWGS plus movement, we sat down and had a really good long discussion about the different ways that this epidemic is embedded into different aspects of our life today. And, we kind of narrowed it down to a few basic main points, which would be trying to address the oppressive systems that we're placed in, strengthening our tribal sovereignty, and overall just trying to improve our image and the representation of our people. And within those things, you have stuff like centering Indigenous ways of knowledge, which includes, recognizing the importance of Indigenous knowledge and using that to prevent the violence against women, children, and girls, and having policies that are catered towards Indigenous communities that are rooted in cultural knowledge systems that are proven to be really effective for our people. And, kind of just addressing the lack of fundamental knowledge and how that's detrimental to the safety of Native women today. You can't prevent and address what you don't know about. And that's just another deliberate form of erasure against our people. And, emphasizing the importance of intergenerational work with centering Native voices, calling for transparency in the data collection of MMIW and the statistics that, we have statistics, but they're by no means indicative of what's actually going on behind the scenes, increasing coverage of Native people and the issues we go through, but specifically Native women. We've seen the biases that media have in the ways that the news outlets fail to cover Indigenous movements and missing persons cases, and just overall having an increased drive to promote and amplify Indigenous voices in the movement and center the people that are doing the work, which is largely Native women.
Well, those are very important recommendations that I hope everyone takes to heart, especially centering Native women in the movement is so important. A final question is going to go to Evan. You've used your talents for the arts to make change. What are your hopes for the future for Native youth and arts as activism?
One of the first things I learned when I started this fellowship wasn't just, our voices are important, we need to be heard, we need to lift these stories. It was, you cannot give from an empty medicine bag. So I want to remind every single youth on this call today that we may step into these roles as advocates. I know as Native youth, we get asked to be educators, program coordinators, facilitators, advocates, and do all these different things and wear all these different hats, but you can't continue to give back to your community if you don't feel yourself first. And that was one of the biggest things I learned over the course of this fellowship. And I know the question was about where I see arts and activism and how I want to see Native youth keep pushing with that. And I really do want to see people pick that up, but I really just want to remind you guys that in the midst of all this, like, this movement is extremely heavy. Like, I remember sitting on calls and we would just have to take breaks from learning all these stories and talking about all these statistics because it got so overwhelming. So I want to remind each and every single one of you, not just the youth, to make sure you're taking care of yourselves, because when you take care of yourself, you're not just taking care of yourself and feeling that trauma inside of you, but you're healing your community through that too. So I'm just going to leave you guys at that. And I hope that in whatever skills you've been gifted, I hope you continue to go out and uplift this movement, but I hope you feel uplifted yourself throughout all of this.
Great. I thank you so much. And before people start hopping off, I just want to bring Eric Stegman on, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Native Americans in Philanthropy, and want to make sure he has a chance to say a couple words before everyone else jumps off. So thank you, Eric.
No problem. And I'm going to keep it quick because I know in Zoom land we've got other things to do. But I just want to express my gratitude to all of the young fellows here today. This was an incredibly inspiring conversation. These are issues that are very close to me. I started my early legal career working with tribal courts in the Southwest on these issues and working on how we prosecute domestic violence in our communities. So just seeing what you're all doing today, it gives me more hope than ever that we're going to finally end this problem. I'm just going to call on the funders who are here with us to please continue to invest in these kinds of efforts. We're here partnering with organizations like like CNAY to make sure that these young leaders have these kinds of platforms to do this work. And we're going to continue to have these kinds of collaborations moving forward. I also just want to let everyone know that they have also put together an amazing policy platform that CNAY is going to be sharing. So please read that platform and share it with others. These are, the recommendations from the ground that these young fellows have put together, and that's what we're going to be using to continue to organize some of our work. With that, I just want to thank everyone for being here today and joining us, and we look forward to collaborating with all of you in the future. And thank you for joining us to honor the memory of all of our missing and murdered Indigenous sisters out there, and just appreciate you being here. Thank you.